1,93 contra 1,88 no peso médio. 1,93 o alcance do Usman. 1,91 o alcance de Chimaev. Vamos ao main event da noite, Brasil 294.
Let's go, fellas. Hold that chair.
Gentlemen, hurry. Let's go down without a fight. This fight is 3 rounds in the UFC. Presented by Vitamin 2. Available now on the PlayStation 5 console. It is easy for cheese. And now, introducing first, pin him down! For the appropriate positional record. Weighing in at 1.5 pounds. On the fighter, holding a professional record, 20 wins, 3 losses. He has 60 balls. Weighing in at 184. Let's go, come on! Let's go! Stick to cover! Everything has to begin. Obviously, it's on. Exit, first ball.
Ótimas emoções. A luta muito esperada. Bola de chegar. Trocaram a mão. Paulo gosta de borrachinha. Assistindo essa luta no camarote. Paulo começou tirando a tela pra cima do ombro. Vamos ver se tá pra cima do ombro. Isso aqui é brincadeira. Olha só. Olha o jogo. Aquela pressão inicial.
Second story! Pour it on! You'll be all right! Get me out of here!
Gotta make it to the
Damn it!
Já colocou outro gancho. Está com a posição de alto.
Toss it!
Ele está respirado, escrevendo meio de luta. 3 minutos e meio ainda para trabalhar e desenvolver esse os ganchos se ele conseguir esticar o Usman ali, que seria a vantagem. O Usman está usando bem a grade, jogando ele para a grade, mas tá difícil tirar das costas dele. E é muito bom essa posição. E é muito bom essa posição. Aí só só que quando a gente for então fazer aqui os cortes, é só espalhar o frango, como a gente chama, esticar a indústria, aí isso vai ter uma pressão muito aí aqui o outro, a cabeça está muito desconectada na luta também, mas segue na posição de vantagem, vamos de Ismael. Uma pressão tremenda para cima do Camaro, sem esse penal. Ninguém acha que tem que fazer uma luta de boxe, os Raptors. Ismael já foi para cima do single leg, está na vantagem. Vai ser um single leg, assim, jogou, né? O single leg. Isso aí, já pulando, já por cima. é aquilo. Ele tá fazendo o tempo completo. Essa pressão inicial é ruim pra ele. Muito ruim. Mas se ele conseguir se defender ou acabar o tempo, né? Vai desgastar. O jogo tá ligado aí.
You have to meet with Crowley and set up defensive position. The Germans fight like hell to hold the garrison.
Vai levar queixo, vai levar tudo novo. Trocou pro lado de cá. Até ele encaixado. Fez uma, tentou sair. Se aventurou. Se sacrifício, se jogou pra baixo, se jogou de lado, fez muito bem a defesa.
I need more ammo, Lieutenant.
Shut
your cover, Private.
Está executando um jogo que faria com o Guaxi. Treinado, planejado, ele não mudou. Ele está fazendo um jogo de posição física, velocidade, pressão dentro do grab. E olha só, ele apertou aquele triângulo aí na barriga, quando o cara ainda está segurando a respiração, né? E foi aquela pressão horrível. 50 segundos. Um afogamento. O Ismael vai tocando o tempo inteiro. E agora você vê que ele bate para buscar o estrangulamento agora. Cara, ele não encontrou esse estrangulamento ainda, Carlão, porque ele é muito maior que o outro. Ele está muito à frente, né? Então o estrangulamento está alto. Ele está um pouco mais embaixo. Exatamente, um pouco mais encaixado, conectado nas costas. Menos de 30 segundos. Golpes conectados, 37 do checheno. 2 golpes de e não trocou o número porque diz aí 5% de aproveitamento das quedas, né? Ele aproveitamento das quedas, né? Ele
Daniel, first aid kit ready for you. Tossing a smoke grenade. Over here!
Mantenha a disciplina e respira. É assim que você fica calmo.
Area clear! Daniel,
Tem que trocar de níveis, tem que controlar os quadris dele. Bom trabalho. Falando ali o Ismael, ele vai ter de cabeça, tem que ter o cotovelo pra bater a cabeça. Quem bateu de cabeça foi o Camaro da grande. O Camaro bateu de cabeça.
Daniel, secure the enemy. Room clear. Gotta set up defenses.
Meus amigos.
Germans will be here soon.
Vamos pro segundo round, hein? Será que o Lobo vai voltar nesse segundo round com a mesma pressão pra cima do Usman? Será que o Usman vai segurar a onda? Mas para esse próximo capítulo, 5 minutos desse segundo round, com o main event, UFC 294. E daqui a pouquinho teremos o título mundial dos leves. Makhachev e Volkanovski 2. Não viu a cor da luva no primeiro round do Camaro Usman. Talvez seja uma vantagem do que ele já entrou na perna, então ele vai deixar essa dúvida, né? Camaro, e será que ele vai entrar de novo? Ele pode colocar o strike, pode colocar, né? Ele tá... Pode trazer essa possibilidade. E a surpresa, né? Eu tô curioso para saber o que o Camaro faz sim, mas faz mais passivo, os baixos são oportunidades. Com a perna direita. Acho que ganhou. Agora sim. Vamos lá, rapaz. Recepção aí, Magali. Agora o Camaro. Bota o jab. Jab muito bom o uso. O jab dele é um ponto forte. O jab é rápido. Sim, só. Difícil ali para tentar nada.
Take out that flamethrower.
40 de segundo, tão bem justiado.
Over here!
Temporal.
They have enough snipers from the building across the center.
Esse cristal daqui, né?
I need that aid kit.
Esse é um presente pra Sila Coelho. Assistindo o Rodrigo, eu tô escutando o cristal do Fight Pass aqui. Tá dentro da minha casa. Leite de Sila.
They're getting too close. Enemies in front, use your Molotovs. Looks like you're full, pal.
O segundo round já foi.
Take out that half-track door.
Essa faixa do céu do entrada de guerra de marisco do arcabouço de Checheno. Fecha. Segue de canhoto, o ex-campeão de 77 quilos.
They're making a push. Use Molotov cocktails. Grenade out!
Bem mais estudado, né? O Jeb vai ditar esse mesmo.
Over here!
Onde explodir
On it!
também, senão ele vai se machucar. A vai voltando, praticamente respirando. O round fez um primeiro round muito forte também, né? Sim, é verdade. Muita pressão. Opa, jab direto, hein? Entrou bem direto. Rolou um diretão de direita, o Usman não tinha época. Um round equilibrado, cada golpe faz a diferença. O time Ed vai pra canhoto, o Usman vai pra queda. Você vê que são 7 golpes conectados com vai bater. Não vai desviar. O time sai. É tudo valendo. É tudo valendo. Interessante, a diferença do Espada tem 5 de cabeça baixa. É, do jeito que entrar, leva, né? Do jeito que vai derrubando. Do jeito vai derrubando. Pra vocês verem o Angel Film e o resto do última época. Mas duas vezes que ele derrubou. Essa posição pega sempre nós senhores? Ou não? Só pra segurar, só pra segurar, só pra irritar o cara. Se sair daqui, eu vou te pegar. Vai terminar.
Outstanding work, boys.
Vamos para o
Outstanding.
terceiro
We
assalto.
did it. The ghost forces are entering the city.
Looks like we might get that champagne and caviar after all.
Hey, Daniels, you still think there's a young gal looking for a handsome GI?
Sorry, buddy. That was just to boost your morale.
Now he tells me.
Stand in front of him shaking, we're going to lose this fight.
É uma coisa a dizer, se você ficar parado na frente dele, você vai perder a luta. Se você fizer,
Something to celebrate, eh, Crowley?
There's no turning back. France has reclaimed Paris.
This ain't exactly over yet. The war's not done.
Oh, come on, Pearson. Let them have this.
That's what Turner's for.
Taking the garrison and helping to liberate Paris is something I'll never forget. Hell, I think I might have seen people.
इसराइली ऑयल फील्ड्स इसकी 70% बिजली पैदा करती है और ईरानी मिसाइल्स यहाँ पहुंचेंगे। मुकाबला ये नहीं कि कौन बड़ा मिसाइल फायर करे, मुकाबला ये है कि कौन लंबी लड़ाई लड़ सकता है। जब सऊदी कॉन्फ्रेंस से अमेरिकी वज़ीर ख़ारजा ने फिलिस्तीन के बारे में पूछा तो
We're in
उन्होंने
Iraq.
सियासी हकीकत से
Krauts are fighting like hell for it because it's the first time one of their cities has been invaded by the Allies. Won't be the last.
इसराइली हुकूमत ने एक लंबी मीटिंग के बाद खबर जारी की है कि ईरान पर हमले का कोई फैसला नहीं हो सका, लेकिन अब उन्होंने खबर में ये कहा है कि इसराइली वज़ीर आज़म के पास इख्तियार है कि वो किसी भी वक्त कैबिनेट को फोन पर इत्तला देकर कर सकते हैं। इस खबर का इस बात का मतलब ये होता है कि फैसला हो चुका है, लेकिन इसराइल किसी खास तरफ से किसी खास इंटेलिजेंस का मुंतज़िर है। इसके बदले ईरान इसराइल इसमें यकीनन इसराइल कोशिश करेगा कि लेकिन इस जैसी अल्टीमेट नतीजे का फैसला इस बात पर नहीं कि किसने किसकी बड़ी दवाई करी है, बल्कि जीत उसकी।
We thought with the liberation of Paris we'd be one step closer to home.
ईरान इसराइल
But our troubles are just beginning.
और मसाइल के एतबार से
We're fighting in the city now, Aqaba. Crowd's got a death grip on
आबादी के
it,
लिहाज से
for good reason.
इसराइल से
We're drilling a hole clear through their western border. Davis has us going block by block, house by house. Knock them all down, he calls it. Turner and Pearson, I ain't seen eye to eye since we got here. The grind's taking a toll on us all.
Time for more beans and bullets.
या फिर सिर्फ अमेरिकी बिलियन
Hey, pick up the pace! We gotta hit CP by nightfall.
So ऐसे में इसराइल
I'm just lying around. From your girl.
Thought I told you not to go through my thing.
What kind of chump doesn't open a sugar
हो चुका है, तो आप इस बारे में चंद
The kind who thinks it's a Dear
पहले
John?
ये कि ईरान
See the address? She wrote Daniels, not Red. Only one reason to be so formal. Hate to say it, I think she's cutting you loose.
और इराक को अरब और
Hey, maybe it's like Schrodinger's letter. You know, you don't open it, she's still your girl.
मादे शिकस्त के बगैर ही इस तरह दोनों
Quit screwing around!
वापस जाना
We hit the State Theater at 07:30 tomorrow.
के कमजोर ईरान पर हमला करने के बावजूद अपने दावा किए हुए इलाके वापस नहीं ले सका, और ये भी हकीकत है कि ईरान ने इराक पर जवाबी हमले में भी कुछ हासिल नहीं किया कि जिसे वो जीत कह सके। लेकिन इससे एक बात वाज़ेह हो गई थी कि ईरान
I gotta believe you still love me if I'm gonna stay strong.
खुद को कायम रखने में कामयाब हो सकता है। सो इस बार अगर इसराइल को ईरान के खिलाफ मुकम्मल फतह
Let's go! Let's go!
Come on, Daniels!
Daniels! I got you! Keep your head down! God damn it! We keep crushing them and they keep coming back! We can't hold the blood much longer!
Artillery's on its way. They're saying 10 minutes top.
Might as well be 10 hours! We've had a corner we
The
can't support now!
tanks are covering our flank.
Pipe down and let me think, goddammit! Alright, Daniel! You and I will go with Pearson and call it in! Move!
Alright,
Cover
let's go.
fire!
Daniels, get to the field phone!
I'm going!
Zimbabwe's advanced, confronting whole populations with impossible choices.
Daniels, get to the phone!
Weapons transformed into the workforce. Area bombing campaigns reaching cities to run. Sieges to populations to starvation.
Get to the phone!
Racial policies for sponsored campaigns of genocide. At the heart of this conflict were ordinary people. Both the best and worst of human.
Daniel! Oh, here you go, Sarge!
People whose lives were
It's Edward White, 27 and villain. We're drawing fire. Requesting immediate support to phase line 2, over.
Copy that, but we'll be leaving our flank exposed.
All right, just get your asses here as soon as you can.
Understood. Working on it.
And make it quick, these packs are tearing us apart! Over and out!
All right, boys, we're rerouting to the Stat Theater. The first platoon needs us. Enemy dispositions unknown. Switching to radio and intercom.
Radio master on!
Rapson, we're taking a right to cut back to the theater.
Right ahead! Roger that, Press!
Abrams, Poole, hold position here with 2nd platoon and cover this flank until we get back.
Copy that! You got it, Price!
Everyone stay sharp. Watch the windows for infantry. All right, Rapson, let's move.
In the peace that followed the First World War, people across the globe bore freely into the to end war wars. Sudden and destructive war lay in the not
Hey, I got movement right side! Our boys at the theater are dealing with the same shit we are. The second we sweep out the Germans, more rush back in.
We're on their turf now. Whole different ballgame.
They want a bloodbath? That's what we'll give them. They don't have a chance in hell.
That's not how they see it.
Spanish Civil War, each in their own way, providing glimpses of the war to come. The nature of war had been shifting from limited warfare towards total war for many years. Military scholars and philosophers sought a way to describe this new kind of warfare. In the 1820s, the influential Prussian general, military scholar Karl von Clausewitz, developed his concept of civil war.
It is like an absolute war where there is no limited political objective. The entire destruction of the enemy's states, if necessary, the total eradication of their enemies. On Clausewitz thought absolute wars are likely. He thought the strain it would place in societies would cause them to collapse. But of course he had not foreseen the development of enormous nation states by the turn of the 20th century.
Von Clausewitz's theory of absolute war anticipated some of the realities of war almost 100 years after he wrote it. In the First World War, he introduced the world to warfare dominated by the industrial strength of the combatants. It was far more destructive than any von Clausewitz would have imagined.
Scale is like nothing we've ever seen before in war, and so are the casualties that follow. But it's more than just the army, it's about how economies are mobilised. For the first time you have major command economies in view, where the government directs the production to support the war effort. There's a huge change in how society approaches the creation of economic wealth.
General Erich Ludendorff, not only the First World Master General, and the overall commander, of the kind of conflict, total war. It was the First World War that alerted Ludendorff and others to the possibilities of total war. But it was the Second World War that demonstrated its catastrophic potential.
This got in total, even more so. Whereas the First World War states that they were well developed and lacked certain features that the Second World War states. In the Second World War you have clearly totalitarian states, and could mobilise their population they've never seen before. Total war encompassed different dimensions. Elements of total war were to do with the level of technology and destruction that was deployed in military action. Others was to do with the way in which civilians were exposed to violence. And different countries engaged in different aspects of that total war to different extents.
Exposure to the different aspects of total war would depend on taking place. The cities of the United States were attacked.
Inbound! Pushing through resistance on our west flank! Over!
Hurry up, Perez! Over and out!
Reps, first platoon's taking heavy fire!
Alright, get the lead out! But the degree to which those living in each country experience total war varied immensely. The citizens of Dresden saw their city destroyed.
I can't see you!
Got eyes on the cathedral, we're almost there!
The people of Melbourne were untouched. The extent to which war dominated the economies of each country committed to the war effort also varied.
Germany, for example, actually didn't mobilise its economy very effectively in a total way until relatively late in the year. Britain started that process much earlier.
Complete mobilisation of the home front was in the Soviet Union, where the true nature of total war was made clear by the German invasion.
Just glanced it! We're in their crosshairs!
It was a struggle for existence.
Front armor blocked the shot!
Society
We're in their
had
sights! We gotta move! Round this! Get beat up!
Right from the beginning, if you endorse the global war, we were breaking down restrictions on the kind of means that can be used to achieve victory. I think Total War has several key features. It is a war that is seen as an existential struggle. The nations that are involved see it as a question of survival or annihilation.
Get out of the crosshairs!
Needed
Around Ricochet off
to
his front!
that struggle are considered to be legitimate.
Get around to his side! We're ahead! Shot Ricochet! Hit the side of his treads!
Total War did not emerge spontaneously. It evolved through the conflicts of the years between the wars, which included and gathered together elements of Total War. With each conflict, people across the world became accustomed to, perhaps desensitized to, the unrestrained violence of Total War. When the Second World War went global in 1941, millions of people would become embroiled in the struggle for total victory or total defeat. The origins of the commitment to total war and total defeat can be traced back to the armistice of 1918.
The First World War ended on November the 11th, 1918, at least in the West. But in fact, fighting went on longer in the East. And I think that's something we should always remember. What happened then is that the leaders of the victorious Allies had to decide how to deal with what was a catastrophic situation in Europe.
In 1919,
let's go! Gotta climb!
Great continental empires that had, for better or for worse, ruled over Europe. Habsburg, Hohenzollern, Romanov,
Tiger! Lure it back! We need to hit its flanks!
The aftermath of the Great War had left parts of Europe starving. It had globalized and industrialized warfare.
We got another battle here too!
And then at the side, leaders from nearly 30 nations came together to establish the terms of peace.
I think they're very much in their minds of those who went to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919 was to try and avert a catastrophe like the one they'd just come through.
Shot bounced off his front! Get me up! His front armor blocked the shot!
The Treaty of Versailles,
we're in their sights! We gotta move! Around Ricochet off his front!
Fine treaties formulated in the Paris Peace Conference.
We have to move! We're too exposed!
The treaty was seen as unnecessarily harsh. The war doom clause, which placed the blame for the war squarely at German feet, had numerous toxic consequences. Payment of billions in reparations. Loss of territory and population.
Got the bastard! Move up the hill where the Titan came
and restrictions on the size of the
Dagwood White 27 Villain! We can't hold on much longer!
Villain to Dagwood White 27. Rapture us down. It's just us now. We're on our way.
Versailles left a legacy of resentment in Germany that was to prove disastrously fertile.
Let's get up this hill.
It was surprising how many people during the making of the Treaty of Versailles were looking forward and saying, well, the Germans are going to be, they're going to be vengeful. There is going to be a new war in due course.
Shocked by the severity of the terms, many Germans believed its punitive measures were unfair.
Fire when I can down here!
Just around the corner.
Became violent as the diktat. Another legacy of the loss that would have far-reaching consequences for the mobilization of the population for total war.
Ready to fire!
And later insistence on total unconditional surrender. Was the Großwasser agenda.
Looks like Turner's squad's in the ship. Got German over here. Take out that panzer tank now.
Was a belief that Germany had never actually defeated in the First World War, that her armies were still in the field and hadn't been overthrown by the Allied army. And then it was only those people at home, socialists, the Jews, the elements who were effectively against the state, who had brought Germany to a situation where they were forced to negotiate peace. This was a myth, it was a very convenient myth, and this played out in a very powerful way in the rise of the right.
Keep on! Almost there! Come off the straggler!
Hitler and the Nazi Party capitalized on rising resentment. The abolition of the treaty was the key platform for the party.
Panzer hitting us in the front! What are you doing? Ground launcher straight ahead!
Not seeing anything. I think we're clear. That's all of them.
Hitler also vowed to create Lebensraum, living space for the German people.
Plaza is clear. Repeat, Plaza is clear.
Appreciate the assist, sir. Dagwood, wide out.
The ideological concept that Germany needed to expand its territory to thrive was not new when Hitler wrote about it in Mein Kampf.
It's actually turn of the century, even late 19th century thinking about empires. And this idea that the future belongs to those powers that have the great spaces, the mass populations, and the industrial resources at hand.
But Hitler's belief that Germany's destiny lay in expanding its territory to the east could only be done through conquest. The implications of the Treaty of Versailles on Germany in the 1920s and 1930s are clear. But the Paris Peace Conference also had broader global implications, one of which was the formation of the League of Nations. The idea of collective security was thought to offer protection against war, a measure of protection against the possibility of another great war. The League was the brainchild of U.S. President Woodrow Wilson.
Perez is going to hold position at the theater to cover our flank. We need to push toward the Hotel Allendorf without armor support.
Put a great deal of faith in the League of Nations. He felt it would provide a way of settling disputes of nations of the world working together, and also providing collective security so that an attack on one member of the League of Nations would be seen as an attack on them all. And it was a very idealistic type of international institution, but I think there was strong support for it at the time.
The League was established on the 10th of January 1920.
Don't waste them. No targets right now.
Despite popular support and President Wilson's enthusiasm for the League, opposition in Congress from those who did not want America embroiled in another European crisis meant that the United States never joined.
Now, if the United States had joined the League of Nations, we'll never know, but the history of the 1920s and 1930s might have been a bit different.
The League's ability to enforce collective security was tested repeatedly during nearly 4 years. One of the greatest tests it faced was Japan's invasion of Manchuria. The Eurocentric view of the Second World War is that it began in 1939. The war was being fought in the East long before Hitler invaded Poland. The invasion of Manchuria in 1931 was perhaps the first step on the long road to World War.
Zara Steiner, the great historian at Cambridge, calls the period from 1929 to 1933 the Hinge years. These are the years that make things different. The Japanese military moved into Manchuria in 1931 in defiance of orders from their own civilian government, and the civilians are increasingly helpless to stop the Japanese militarists.
Japan had a presence in Manchuria from the early 20th century, when victory in the Russo-Japanese War had secured for Japan control of the Liaodong Peninsula, and with it, the South Manchurian Railway. The neutrality of the area was also important to Japan, to serve as protection for their derivative interests in Korea, which Japan had formally annexed in 1910.
Hang in there, buddy!
Manchurian incident began with an explosion along a section of the South Manchurian Railway on the night of September 18, 1931.
Lob a smoke grenade!
The explosion was created as a pretext for invasion by officers of the Japanese Kwantung Army.
Sergeant, call him out!
From the authority of the government
ready
of
for
Tokyo.
ammo! Here, Daniels!
It was planned by two relatively junior officers, but within the space of about 5 to 10 days, they managed to occupy large parts of a region that is about the size of France and Germany combined. So this was really one of the most daring military actions that has been seen really in the 20th century. Now, many people ask, why didn't international structures, why didn't the international community do more at that time? Why didn't the Americans take action, or the British, or the League of Nations?
Hang in there, buddy!
Lack of food is causing great starvation. The relief agencies give aid as best they can.
Hang in there, buddy!
I should the nationalist government in China offered limited assistance. The
Point him out, Sergeant!
Would resolve the conflict.
Sir, ready for ammo!
Yes, for a few moments, recall to your mind the history of the present crisis.
The League investigated and labeled Japan the aggressor. The international community was not inclined to become actively involved.
It's gone through a deeply traumatic, terrifying experience with war on their doorstep. Like you, they threatened to go to war for a very far-off country in East Asia, which they didn't regard as a serious ally, was something that I think at the time few would have.
Japan rejected the League's censure and refused to return Manchuria to China.
We sure as hell can't go back into the street. This wall looks weak. Daniels, use your launcher to clear a path.
Adopted by the Assembly.
In March 1933, Japan abandoned the League, clearly undermining its capacity for enforcing collective security.
And there is an international, almost applause of what Japan is doing. When we look at international magazines, both British and Japanese, that deal with the idea of imperial development or colonialism, there's constant British discussion of excellent impact that Japan is having in East Asia.
Manchuria, or Manchukuo, as it was renamed by the Japanese, who set up a puppet regime under China's last emperor, remained in Japanese hands until Japan's defeat in 1945. The invasion of Manchuria showed Japan and other aggressive nations that there would be minimal consequences for violating the League's
Send
rules.
it this way!
And that was dangerous, because Japan was not the only nation intent on expanding her borders in the 1930s.
Use the bazooka to clear a path.
In October 1935, Italy invades Ethiopia and insists on doing it in a dramatically fascist fashion with a massive army and with the use of massively superior air force.
The Italian invasion of Ethiopia, then known as Abyssinia, fulfilled what Benito Mussolini referred to as natural expansion. Duce believed Italy should be an imperial power, and colonization of the independent Ethiopia offered a chance to build his empire. So often agriculture rank becomes a fertile regions. It's possible, I think, to argue that when Mussolini decided to invade Abyssinia, Ethiopia, and conquer it as part of the Italian Empire, and the other powers failed to stop him, that this is a turning point. But once that's happened, you're on the march now to Japanese aggression, German aggression, and so on. And you're on the march for the Second World War. The pretext for the invasion was an incident at Val in December 1934. Somalis serving Mussolini fired on the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians returned fire, and this was Mussolini's casus belli for mobilizing his troops. Standing on a Roman balcony, Mussolini announced the invasion of Ethiopia on the 2nd of October 1935.
While soldiers in East Africa who are about to start fighting sends a message. Italy and the world knew that meant war.
Could use some target smoke.
In Ethiopia, civilians quickly became targets.
Not now. No enemies in sight.
Keep pushing!
They were terrorized on the ground, as well as from aerial bombardments. It began with days of permanent hostilities. On December 26, 1935, Mussolini agreed to the use of poison gas.
Ready when you are.
I got you.
Before the year's out, villagers had been drenched with mustard gas.
Take a closer look. Yes, sir.
Women and children, frail and aged, were intentionally targeted. Their skin burned, livestock killed, and water supplies poisoned. Mussolini denied using gas against civilians.
Mussolini claimed that the frightful wounds that the Ethiopians got from the poison gas, that it was just a form of leprosy, and they weren't really using poison gas against the Ethiopians at all. The trouble was that the democracies tended to connive because they didn't want to force the issue into a shooting war. In fact, we had retrieved from Ethiopia a canister of poison gas marked in Italian, so we knew exactly what was going on. And we therefore, as I say, in a sense colluded with the Italian atrocities in Ethiopia.
The more widespread use of gas against civilians in Ethiopia demonstrated that the moral boundaries protecting non-combatants were being obliterated. Unrestrained violence against civilians was becoming normalized. Civilians were fair game as part of military tactics and as the capital for callous retribution.
And so in a way, it's the Ethiopian War, I think, that turns Mussolini into a bad dictator. Lots of people in 1932 would have still thought, oh well, for Italians at least he's a rather good dictator.
In Addis Ababa, in February 1937, Italian army and fascist paramilitary forces rampaged through the city, in retribution for an attempt on the life of the fascist governor, General Rodolfo Graziani.
This is a typical assault on the main sort of repository of Ethiopian history at a monastery called Libanos, where the Italians destroyed the monastery, killed the monks, burned the history. It's a classic example of Europeans saying that blacks can't have history, only Europeans have history, so bad luck.
At home, Mussolini worked to mobilize the Italian economy for his war of civilization and liberation. Called for wives to donate their wedding rings to the war effort. They enthusiastically did. Queen Helena made a ceremony of donating her ring.
Queen Helena inaugurates Italy's to sacrifice their rings for the fatherland.
Mussolini recognized that the need to mobilize the economy and win the support of the population at home were key elements of modern war. But Italy was far from being an industrial power of the first rank. The mobilization of resources for the Abyssinian adventure and for involvement in the Spanish Civil War fatally undermined Mussolini's capacity to fight a total war in alliance with Hitler's Reich. The League of Nations condemned the Italian invasion. Sanctions failed to make any real difference. The import of mules and camels was banned, but not cars and lorries. France and Britain tried to negotiate a plan with Ethiopia and Italy that would cede 2/3 of Ethiopia to Italy, but both parties rejected it.
We need to remember that the great powers, in this case Britain and France, were imperial powers too. And it was quite hard for them to say to Mussolini, hang on, we've got big empires, but actually you can't have one. And they tried to stitch a deal with him so that he would have influence in Abyssinia and bits of territory and so on, because they were quite used to carving up parts of Africa in their own interest.
The Abyssinia crisis, following Japan's invasion of Manchuria, further undermined collective security and the credibility of the League.
We're gonna have to squeeze through. Looks awful tight.
The Emperor Haile Selassie abandoned Ethiopia. He sought and was reluctantly granted asylum in London. He made an appearance at the League of Nations and was greeted by jeering Italian press and others who turned their backs in protest at his appearance. Finally, when the scene settled, he told those assembled, "You abandoned us to Italy." This, he asserted, was a terrible precedent of bowing before force and a foreshadowing of things to come. "It is us today," he told the League. "It will be you tomorrow."
I think we're so focused on Hitler in the 1930s, the impact he had on other politicians, that we forget, I think, that Mussolini was, for many years, a much more important figure. He was a fascist dictator for 11 years before Hitler came to power. He was generally viewed in the 1920s and 1930s as a serious politician, also a serious threat in some way.
In May 1936, Mussolini announced victory to jubilant Italian crowds.
You okay? I'm good.
Italy had destroyed primitive villages and intentionally targeted civilians with bombs and gas. It used war to expand its territory. draw on the agricultural resources of occupied land, and mobilize its own economy to support the war effort. Europe watched. As Mussolini was declaring victory in Abyssinia, Spain was falling into a brutal civil war. It would profoundly affect the lives of civilians and prepare the path towards total war. The conflict, which grew from a failed to was a complex struggle fought between centralism and regionalism, nationalism and republicanism, left and right, authoritarian and libertarian viewpoints. It tore the country apart.
What we can say in terms of the Spanish War and the international context is the Spanish Civil War was absolutely, in its origins, the Spanish War, a national domestic conflict. And that held good both for the origins and for maybe the first 2 weeks of the Civil War and thereafter. Spain became a battlefield in an international war.
Italy and Germany supported the nationalists. The Republicans found support in the Soviet Union. And both sides attracted adventurers, idealists and fanatics from all over the world. Most famously on the Republican side, in the form of the International Brigades.
Now, in terms of both Hitler and Mussolini, it's often said, that what they did was ideological, supporting another fascist, that it was also about experimenting with new military equipment, which to an extent it was. But the key thing that was behind the thinking of both of them was to undermine Britain and France.
There were no simple alliances in this war, and everyone, including civilians, were both targets and potential enemies.
One of the most terrible aspects of the Civil War is the arming of youth to school age. The youngest rebel in arms is lionized by his fellows when he leaves hospital at Vergara. The crowd stands to attention with a fascist salute as the 14-year-old veteran, healed of his wounds, comes out to report for duty.
The concept of a fifth column emerged in this war. Nationalist General Emilio Mola, moving on the drill of his four-column army, described the fifth column of supporters already in the drill, undermining his opposition. The idea of fifth columnists later fueled fear and the persecution of enemy aliens in the Second World War. Several reprisals against opponents and suspected opponents were carried out by both sides. Campaigns of fear and terror were intentionally followed. Thoughts of rape were broadcast over the radio, and those whose families had fled were killed. As nationalist forces moved through an area, one of the symbols having shown loyalty to the Popular Front government was in danger. Armies in Madrid set up checkers, revolutionary tribunals, held trials of the sort, and shot those voting victory, killing their bodies in the street. While on the right, nationalist purge committees instituted those with liberal sensibilities. The war not only endangered the lives of civilians, it mobilized their labor and their homes. The defense of Madrid involved large-scale civilian mobilization, anticipating that which would be enacted in Leningrad and other cities during the Second World War. The community prepared for war. Women and children created barricades from rocks and stones. Buildings were requisitioned. Unions formed battalions.
Outside the city, the government army digs itself in and prepares for the assault of the river.
The city turned to stalemate. The nationalists resorted to aerial bombardments. Almost all of the residential areas were bombed. It was an ultimately fruitless attempt to break morale, but a very instructive rehearsal for future action.
As far as Hitler was concerned, his participation in the Spanish Civil War had been immensely beneficial. They managed to trial a number of military tactics which would be used in the Blitzkrieg in Poland first and then in France, that had actually been used. I mean, the culmination, if you like, was when it all been trialed.
The began with a single bomber on the afternoon of Monday, 26th of April, 1937. The main church bell rang out in warning of the air attack. Refugees, troops, and the town's civilian population made their way to the refuges. The German population had more firepower than all the air forces of the First World War combined. And one bomber from its experimental squadron wreaked havoc on the center of town. Once it had passed, people emerged from the shelters to help the wounded and were surprised when 15 minutes later, the full experimental squadron flew over, dropping its bombs. Then at 5:15, the town was carpet-bombed by 3 squadrons operating in 20-minute relays for 2.5 hours. Incendiaries blanketed the city in flames, as in the skies above, the precursor to the Luftwaffe, reversed destruction for the war to come.
A lot of military equipment, high-tech military equipment was tested in Spain. So for Hitler, the consequences were positive. As far as Mussolini was concerned, it was a much more complicated issue. At one level, he gained the foreign policy and the propaganda triumph, but at a huge cost. Italy had sent maybe 80,000 troops, a high number of casualties. It had used about half of its naval fleet and almost all of its air fleet. Large amounts of equipment were left behind when the Italians went on Spain.
Our mission was to secure this hotel.
For the rest of the world, Spain offered a glimpse of the total war to come. It was a war fought with the legs of the people, marked by destruction that did not discriminate between combatant and non-combatant.
When the hell are you going to
Battlefield and suburban street.
All right, we're going to get these people
The
out of here.
consequences of total war
Daniels,
were also becoming clear.
take that truck, rendezvous with us on the west side of the hotel.
The situation for the hundreds of thousands of refugees who fled Spain was dire. France offered some asylum, but conditions in the hastily assembled camps were terrible. Running water latrines. In some camps, refugees dug holes in the ground for shelter. The cost of supporting refugees was in the millions of francs per day, and the French government faced opposition from those opposed to admitting refugees. France faced a foreshadowing of the crisis that would overrun Europe at the end of the Second World War.
They're civilians. We send them to the rear. That's what we do.
In the Pacific, too, a humanitarian crisis was unfolding. Japan's war against China paused, following the annexation of Manchuria. In 1937, it flared catastrophically when Japan launched a full-scale invasion.
World War II broke out on the 7th of July, 1937. This is not a date that European historians generally attribute to this event, but I think there is a very strong case that actually the Second World War began in particularly in the feud between locally garrisoned Chinese and Japanese troops in a bridge called Urochao, known in the West as the Marco Polo Bridge.
Ceasefire discussions failed. China mobilized for war against Europe. A war that would temporarily hold the Civil War fought between Chinese nationalists and communists, who came together to form a united front against invasion.
I think it's fair to say that Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists were well aware that the invasion was something likely. And increasingly, in the mid-1930s, they had made preparations. However, they were significantly outnumbered and outgunned. The Japanese had a huge advantage in terms of mechanized divisions, in terms of artillery, and particularly in terms of
Lies conflict in North China. This worked initially. As Beijing was then called, Tiananmen fell quickly after intense aerial bombardments.
They expected to be a quick lightning. They'll probably end either with the collaboration with Chinese regime during their or even full-scale implementation of China. surprised when the initial phase of fighting took rather longer than they had thought. Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Chinese government, had never believed that a war with Japan would be quick or easy, and he had made plans for an extended, protracted war that would probably involve withdrawal into the interior of China for quite a long period of time until international assistance could be persuaded to come China's way.
Chiang Kai-shek chose Shanghai as the place where he would make a stand against the Japanese. Once a small fishing village, by 1937, Shanghai had become a vibrant international center for commercial affairs. It was home to universities, European banks, and foreign-owned factories. On the 14th of August, Black Saturday, bombers of the Chinese Air Force set out to target Japanese naval assets.
I think they might be regrouping on the north side. We gotta get these folks out fast.
Drop their bombs on known targets.
Too risky. We don't want them caught in the crossfire.
Areas of the city.
Just hurry.
This hotel in the shopping district, Avenue Edward VII,
There's civilians. They need our help.
The international settlement, thought to be safe, was a scene of destruction.
Get the civilians out of here.
Soon enough, Japanese aerial bombardment also began, with attempts to capture the city, leading to fighting on the streets.
Oh, hold on, where you going? What's she saying?
She thinks your sister went back to the basement.
Well, that's where she's saying. We gotta get these people out of here. Come on, Lieutenant.
Let me
Nobody's
go.
going.
In Shanghai,
Got 2 minutes. I'm
to the
going with you.
international
Nope,
community
just game. It's too
indiscriminate
dangerous. I
nature
need
of
everyone here
aerial
to cover the
warfare.
perimeter. Yes, sir. You get back here fast.
International concession areas were not specifically targeted, but nonetheless suffered casualties.
We don't have time to waste. Find Anna.
After further fighting around Suzhou Creek and following the landing of a Japanese amphibious force at Hangzhou Bay, Tell realized his troops could not hold the city.
The fighting in Shanghai was terribly brutal. Japanese losses were about 40,000 soldiers, and Chinese losses were probably around 200,000 mark. But when the Japanese landed in Hangzhou, just south of Shanghai, they broke through the lines and advanced very, very quickly towards
Nanjing, also known as Nanking, was a culturally significant city for China. Renowned for its architecture, it had been China's capital under numerous empires. And in 1937, it was the nationalist capital under the leadership of Chiang Kai-shek. The cultural significance would offer no protection to the war.
Written by Japanese and Western scholars that has to really stand out as the religious and cultural Japanese atrocities of China.
On the 7th of December, Cheng, recognizing the inevitability of losing the city, left for the country's interior.
Gotta find Anna.
In the days leading to its fall, panic engulfed Nanjing. Residents fled to the public buildings and colleges in the designated safety zone in anticipation of the Japanese advance.
Gotta be here somewhere.
The 12th of December was a clear and relatively peaceful day. Artillery was firing. There were no air raids. But by nightfall, the city was in flames. The Chinese defense had buckled, and the defending troops had been given orders to abandon the city. Before leaving, the troops set many buildings alight, a common practice in total war. By the time the Japanese army entered the capital, it was already burning. When Japanese troops arrived, a new level of brutality and violence erupted.
Getting from Shanghai to Nanjing was not particularly pleasant, so there is an argument that the brutality of war breeds further brutality and makes these actions more likely. I think it's fair to say that there was probably a breakdown in certain areas of Japanese command during the period.
From the first hours until the middle of January 1938, the people of Nanjing endured unrestrained violence. homes were repeatedly invaded. Women raped. Men suspected of being soldiers, mutilated and killed. Corpses lined the streets. Few in the city were safe. One witness wrote that up to 1,000 women and girls were assaulted in one night.
I think where we are with the Nanjing Massacre, as I think where we are with many other similar events around the world, is not perhaps to look at the massacre as a whole, but to think about why would a soldier or a group of soldiers commit certain actions. Because it's one thing to execute several thousand prisoners of war because you've been told to do so. It's another thing to go around raping women and killing children.
In the Japanese case, I think there's an intersection of both ideology and a certain kind of military governance. The Japanese military were immensely powerful and had incredibly racist, denigratory attitudes towards the peoples of East Asia, over which they were gradually annexing territory.
Nanjing was a foretaste of the impact Japan's imperial ambitions would have on civilians in occupied territory as the war continued. It also demonstrated the influence the military had achieved over Japan's governing structures by 1937.
It's important to remember, Japan's wars were part of a long-run expansion of Japanese influence throughout the East Asian region. But over the course of the interwar period, as military control over Japan was increased and became more radicalized, and the willingness to give a military essentially abusive free rein over a civilian population did not seem problematic, and it didn't seem that it would threaten Japan's reputation in a modern wartime environment, in a world in which all the powers seemed willing to see war as encompassing these kind of strategies.
There are no definitive casualty figures for the number of people who died in Nanjing. The scale of slaughter can only be tallied in estimates.
Most scholars now would accept that between 200 and 300,000 people died. The fact is, we will never know. We simply don't have accurate records. 200 to 300,000 is accepted as a figure.
Come on, let's get you
In
back to
Nanjing,
this.
the line between combatant and non-combatant was erased. Violence was used as a deliberate weapon of war against the civilian population. An element of total war that would soon be employed elsewhere in the Asia-Pacific region and in Europe. After the fall of Nanjing, the Chinese nationalists moved to Wuhan. The Japanese advance through China continued, and by June 1938, the position at Wuhan was under threat. Considering his options for defense of the temporary capital, Chiang Kai-shek made a decision that profoundly affected the people of Hunan, Anhui, and Jiangsu provinces.
It's all right.
He ordered the Chinese nationalist armies to breach the dikes of the Yellow River. They would use water instead of soldiers to defend the city. The floods that followed have been described as perhaps the single most environmentally damaging act of warfare in world history.
It wasn't possible to warn the Chinese population in advance. Chiang Kai-shek was concerned that there were Japanese spies across the countryside. The flood eventually affected something like 54,000 square kilometers. It killed up to 500,000 people, with 4 to 5 million refugees created by this flooding.
The diversion of the river delayed the Japanese advance, but it did not defeat it.
Chinese defense is resolute. This impedes but doesn't stop the Japanese who cross the stream, tanks and all.
It bought the nationalist government time to withdraw and relocate its capital to southwest China in the city of Chongqing. Wuhan fell in October 1938. The flooding of the Yellow River shows the extent to which strategy can ignore the fate of civilians.
Hold on, don't shoot!
The Sino-Japanese War previewed numerous aspects of the total war that Europe would experience.
It's all right.
Another example is the bombing of Chongqing. As the Japanese advanced, people fled their homes in search of safety. Many fled to Chongqing, remote enough for Cheng to have made it his capital. Remote, but not safe.
If we want to see a place that best represents total war in China, Chongqing is probably that place. At the beginning of the war, the Japanese targeted factories, munitions, infrastructure. They were interested primarily in weakening the ability of the Chinese to respond to their attacks. When it became apparent that China was not going to surrender, that Chiang Kai-shek was not going to come to the negotiating table, and the war became more protracted, Japanese tactics changed, and they embarked on the type of terror bombing that we see later on in the war.
The attacks on the 3rd and 4th of May 1939 marked the beginning of a campaign of terror from the air.
The estimates are, throughout the whole period that Chongqing was under attack, something like 9,300 aircraft dropped over 20,000 bombs of the city.
No!
Like
Just don't shoot!
50,000 people were killed.
The Japanese refined the strategy of Guernica in their strategic bombing raids.
Hold on, don't shoot!
But where the bombing of Guernica lasted a day, Chongqing endured repeated attacks over a period of 2 years. Fear was amplified by incendiary bombs and delayed fuses, and it spread to Europe. In 1932, British Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin had spoken of the fear of the air. The direct threat to civilians that bombers posed. He had famously said, "We'll always get through." And it seemed that the experience of Madrid, of Guernica, Shanghai, and Chongqing proved all right.
When people look today at newsreel footage or photographs of the war in China in its first 2 or 3 years, 1937 to 1939, I think what might strike them is not so much its strangeness, but its familiarity. The city of Chongqing, the temporary capital of China, being bombed. The digging of trenches in the streets of Shanghai during the desperate battle for that city. The sending of refugees from the vulnerable cities to the interior. The eerie thing is, these things were happening in China before they happened in the West. Therefore, when we think about the experience that we associate with the war in the West, even something as iconic as the Blitz in London, we should remember that those experiences were not just shared in China. Often, the Chinese were there first.
When the Second World War broke out in Europe, many aspects of total war were already familiar. The Abyssinia crisis, the Spanish Civil War, and the Sino-Japanese War had each acted as portents of the total war to come.
I'm getting us out!
The world had borne witness to terror-bombing campaigns, unrestrained violence against civilians, to incalculable numbers of refugees displaced by war.
I've got you!
Borne witness, and if it had not been pushed on its shoulders, it had resigned itself to one fact.
Gunfire this way! Too risky!
This is what war now meant. As the 1930s wore on, and the inability of the League of Nations to maintain colonial security became clear, this war lasting peace.
Keep going, man!
Mussolini, Stalin,
Can't go there!
Spain erupted. Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power.
Not that way!
And Japan's imperial intentions became increasingly clear.
Go forward! You've got this, Red!
Economies and populations across the globe began to mobilize for a war that the years between the wars had shown.
Come on, Red! Keep moving!
On battlefields and at sea.
I'm right here!
In the cities,
It's okay!
and in the factories and down the mines, in the homes and classrooms, and on the streets, and on the farms. It would be war. Total war saw his
Shit! I got you, Anna.
in the city, far was advanced, confronting whole populations with impossible choices. The manufacture of weapons transformed industry and the workforce. Area bombing campaigns reduced cities to rubble. Sieges doomed populations to starvation.
Thank you.
Racial policies sponsored campaigns of genocide.
Okay, they can take it from here. Let's go.
We're escorting them, and that's fine. Pearson's right, sir. If we go with them, chances are they'll draw fire. Seems like a risky move. Private Sussman, we are clearing this street and then getting them out. Understood? I understand, sir. I just think they might be safer on their own.
And if we let the Germans reoccupy this hotel, every squad that comes through here will be in danger.
This isn't Kasserine. We have the upper hand. Get them on the truck.
Sure, show.
Defend your position! Gotta clear the street!
Total war. Missions in these troops had to be optimized. Populations mobilized, economies refocused towards war. This treaty meant the treaty was by the mid-1930s, nations began to mobilize in earnest.
Very aware that a new total war would require massive mobilization. Indeed, this is one of the fears people had, that another great war would have tremendous economic as well as political and ideological consequences.
The threat of total war was not faced by ever greater numbers of technologically advanced weapons.
Come on!
Total war would be fought in the factories as well as on the battlefields by workers as well as soldiers. Any victory would be won by whichever nation could produce and deploy the greatest number of weapons.
She shot at the truck!
This understanding of the strain that total war would put on nations inspired rounds of peace agreements.
Go on! Go!
Early 1930s,
The hell are you doing?
Following orders. Everyone back to the hotel! Move!
Peace and preventing an arms race.
Hey, there's nothing we can do.
Some of these pacts met with initial success. Momentum towards total war steadily increased as each agreement faltered.
We secured Aachen, opened the western corridor to the Rhine.
1932 and 1933. Representatives from 60 countries attended. The negotiations failed when Germany sought military parity with other Western powers.
After Aachen, nothing could be the same. But we finally got a foothold into Germany. The gateway to the Rhine is open, and there's no turning back.
Both Germany and Japan withdrew from the League of Nations in 1933.
It is now clear that the disarmament conference will not fulfill what is its sole object, namely general disarmament. German government is accordingly compelled to leave the disarmament conference.
We thought there was time, Chief. Last time I checked, Turner was in charge, not you. Is he making the calls now?
No, sir. It's my call. It's on me.
It's on both. Yeah, well, right now, the last thing I should be worried about is if two of my best men can
We need to think in terms of what at the time statesmen, scholars, military thinkers of all ideological shades thought mobilization meant. What they really thought it meant at core was mobilization of the power of the state to affect the economy, markets, to put people in jobs, in positions, in uniform, with ever greater force.
It's been 3
Hitler
weeks.
began planning for rearmament as early as
Now clearing it so
1933,
the convoy can get
but
to
kept his
Rhine.
activities secret
I'm
from
not
the
proud to
international
admit it's
community
taken
until
me this long to open
1935.
the letter.
If it's over,
Thereafter, as he openly defined the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles,
Hitler's path to total war became increasingly clear to the international community.
That's huge.
By about 1936, you're seeing the glow. What's interesting is that there was an assumption that those states that had dictatorships, that had state-controlled economies, had a lead in the army.
Sure you do.
The Reich's law for the construction of the armed forces reintroduced conscription, included plans for the expansion of the Navy and Army.
I tried to the day you were shipping out.
580,000 men by 1939. Versailles had kept the army at 100,000.
Everyone gather
The new Air
around.
Force would combine with the Navy and Army to create the Wehrmacht.
Davis is talking.
Hitler's four-year plan, launched in 1936, laid out his aims for rearmament. In 4 years, Hitler demanded the German army must be ready for combat,
It's dark
and the
nearly
German economy
impenetrable.
must be
Our mission
capable of war.
is to take Hill 493.
The heart
Whoever
of the
holds the
plan was
hill
self-sufficiency,
dominates the valley.
autarky.
For lesser men,
The
this
German armed
task
forces
might
often
seem
talk about having some sort
insurmountable.
of economic
But our
dictator,
division
someone who would
boasts
come
a
in
proud history
and
of firsts.
subordinate the aircraft
World War I,
manufacturers,
we
the
were first to
operating
hold off a
vehicle
German attack.
manufacturers, petroleum
First
industry,
to
and
launch
so
a
on,
counteroffensive.
create an independent,
First
self-sufficient
across the Rhine.
economy.
Nothing has ever stopped us.
Externally, it looked
Nothing
like
ever will.
Nazi Germany was
Lieutenant,
mobilizing
tell 'em what we're all
to some sort
about.
of grand Machiavellian plan that it was
No
all
mission
going to
too
be perfect.
difficult, no sacrifice too great.
And outsiders came as
I
the
can't hear
civilians.
you.
So French and British military intelligence
No mission too
assumed
difficult, no
the Germans were
sacrifice
doing
too
everything
great.
efficiently.
Duty
That's
first.
right. Now get ready to
The truth
move out.
is, it was disorder and chaos on the inside.
Duty first. Back to the
One
old
example
Negro.
of such inefficiency
Amen, brother.
was the lack of standardization across German industry. At one point, German factories were producing 425 different kinds of airplanes, 151 types of trucks, 150 different motorcycles. When Germany went to war, this diversity, which made staggering demands on the spare parts inventory, was to prove disastrous.
When we think about Goering running the 4-year plan, I mean, he may have been once a great aviator, but did he understand the fundamentals of running the German economy? I don't think so.
In response to the increasing threat of war, Britain followed a dual strategy of rearmament and appeasement. These diplomatic solutions sometimes came at a cost to others. Germany invaded Austria in March 1938. The Union, or Anschluss, was confirmed a month later by orchestrated plebiscite, returning a vote 99.7% in favor. Britain did not see the Anschluss as a threat, so did not oppose it. The Saar region had also been returned to Germany following a plebiscite in 1935.
Joy day in the South. Germany exults in reunion with her divorced province.
Hitler was taking tentative steps towards his goal of a greater Germany, and finding little opposition.
the chef. Only the finest, eh?
Lebensraum, living
How's it
space,
looking?
which meant expansion to the east, must follow.
Those guns aren't letting up.
The sacrifice of the Sudetenland in the Munich Agreement
That's the
was the
plan.
most cynical example of Britain's appeasement policies in action.
Thanks.
The Sudeten region of Czechoslovakia included about 3 million people of German origin. Hitler began planning for the occupation of Czechoslovakia in May 1938. As the situation escalated and war looked imminent, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain met with Hitler to negotiate.
Our objective is to eliminate the hilltop artillery so we can hold the
After a
fort.
series of negotiations, a four-hour conference was held to decide the issue.
Then we move out.
In September 1938, the leaders of Britain and France complied with Hitler's demands.
Britain's been changing hands all day.
The Sudetenland was surrendered to Germany in exchange for a hollow promise of peace.
Britain was very much influenced by its experience in the First World War. The cost in blood and treasure had been so great that there was a feeling that if in any way they could negotiate a war away, that is, appease Hitler in particular, they would do it.
The Munich Agreement and the appeasement strategy did not secure peace for our time, as Chamberlain claimed.
it did buy time enough for Britain to continue to scale up preparations for war.
What's important to understand about the arms race from 1936 to 1941 is that it's not simply about building up forces, not building ships, not just about building tanks for men. It's about expanding the economic base, regimenting people, and securing resources to wage war.
As nations inch closer to total war, an increasing amount of the British national budget was being allocated to defence. In 1935, the British Royal Navy was the largest in the world, and the Royal Air Force was among the most powerful. It was only the army that remained relatively small as part of a strategy that sought to fight total war at arm's length.
Everyone on me!
What does this mean? It means no conscription, either in the United Kingdom or in the rest of the Empire. It means a focus on attacking not enemy armed forces, but enemy populations and enemy industry. It means to do this with what we might call today high-tech weapons, a very powerful Navy and a very powerful Air Force centred on bombing. Now, the aim of this was to achieve offensive power at a low cost, both a financially low cost and a low cost in terms of the non-militarization of British society.
We're advancing to the assembly point once the bridge is secure.
Judging by these craters, it ain't gonna be easy.
Easy's not why we're here, right?
The French invested in defence. Work began on the Maginot Line in 1930. This heavily fortified defensive barrier, running parallel to the border with Germany, would repel an invasion and prevent repetition of the catastrophic losses of the First World War. So long as the invaders were obliging enough to come in the expected direction. The next line was to seize back the mobilists and transport them, and in the event of a no match for the ability of the French were allied to a country that was, thanks to its empire, troops.
The two greatest empires of the world, the French Empire and the British Empire, were united and could quite reasonably anticipate emerging victorious over Germany should there be a war in Germany.
The Soviet Union, Stalin anticipated a future war, knowing his nation was not as prepared as it could be.
The Soviet Union expected war for a very long time, and they knew that they were behind. They had lost the First World War. They assumed that one of the reasons they lost was that they were not adequately prepared.
By the 5-year plans, industrialization.
Enemies concealing their movement.
Stalin transformed the Soviet Union into an industrialized socialist state.
There's a very drastic appreciation of the potential dangers of living in what they perceived as capitalist encirclement. That is the only socialist country, and the perception was that everybody wanted to invade them.
Collectivization gathered individually owned farms into state collective farms.
You gotta be alright!
The plan aimed to free laborers for working factories.
Get me out of here! Hang in there, buddy!
An estimated 5 million simple Philadelphia peasants, known as kulaks, killed or deported. The 5-year plans also nationalized industry and services. A large share of the investment was directed into heavy industry at the expense of consumer goods. This combined economy helped prepare the nation for total war. The 5-year plans shattered the lives of millions.
I need that
exit! Militarized the Soviet Union so that it was better prepared to fight a total war than it might otherwise have been.
Panzer! Check your mines, grenades, whatever you can find! Yes,
For example, in 1927, the Soviet Union produced 500 motor vehicles. 13 years later, in 1940, they produced 200,000. It says a lot about the 5-year plans that Stalin initiates and just how heavily focused they were on heavy industry, on armaments. This is key to surviving the German invasion of the Soviet Union.
The Germans launched their invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. The Soviet preparations for war became
We must also be careful in looking at Soviet production. The material itself is not powerful military effectiveness. That means we shouldn't confuse the two. We need a full system of war to truly utilize all of this production. That means good doctrine, good training, and good command culture.
The Red Army had been severely compromised by the agencies, in which some of the Red Army's greatest leaders had been charged with involvement in a Nazi Soviet plot. Thousands were executed, and tens of thousands discharged from their positions. Great purge seriously weakened the army as the nation prepared to war. This opportunity was able to hold
Another German rocket launcher! Good! Now hit that Panzer!
resources to Soviet leaders into enormous territory, stretching supply lines.
Great job, Daniel! It's almost dead!
Panzer's down!
For the Soviet case, it's, I think, nearly an ideal typical total war. The activities of the state focus nearly completely and exclusively on mobilization to war and on provision of the Red Army, to the extent that they give up a lot of things they had done about controlling civilian consumption, distribution, and basically lets locals deal with it.
Let's move! Rally on me!
The United States abstained from mobilizing for war altogether in the 1930s.
Rally up!
Weary of European wars and equally wary of bankers and munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war,
Everyone on me!
the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Bankers and munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible.
See you soon. Yeah, you be careful out there.
Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect, as munitions dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved. The armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war. For as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. The armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war. The focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible.
Here you go, Private!
Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible.
Yeah, it's a trap! We've been
Weapons
spotted!
manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. The armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war. The focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible. Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible.
Get up, Red. I know you better
Weapons
than anyone, so I know you still got
reluctant to
fight.
get involved again.
Can't give up.
When the armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality for as long as possible.
I'm afraid I won't
Weapons
make it.
manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved again. When the armistice came into effect as ammunition dealers who sought to make their fortunes in war, the focus remained on neutrality
I got
for as long
faith
as
in you,
possible.
baby brother.
Weapons manufacturers were also reluctant to get involved
Leave me
again.
alone, baby brother.
When the armistice came into effect at the end of the First World War, government munitions contracts had been abruptly terminated. Flaws prevented companies from writing off machines which were not worn out or obsolete. Factories across the country were demolished, including what was at the time the biggest rifle manufacturing plant in the world.
On the other hand, as Europe darkened over the 1930s, you had an increasing group of people who thought that the safety of the United States was very much tied up with keeping Europe out of war. And so therefore, the difficulty of the United States in the 1930s was with the Depression, when 1/3 of the country was out of work for a considerable time, and the fact that because of this, the U.S. didn't really have a foreign policy in the 1930s. No one really knew what they wanted to do, or if they did know what they wanted to do, they weren't sure they could actually accomplish it. So moving towards the Second World War in the United States, you had a lot of confusion.
Beagle, beagle!
In September 1939, one poll suggested that at least 2/3 of the population had no desire to provide aid to the Allies. But within a few short years, the United States was transformed from an isolationist nation intent on neutrality to the arsenal of democracy. To create the arsenal, President Roosevelt ramped up the defense budget.
We must increase the production facilities for everything needed for the Army, Navy, for national defense.
The most prominent examples was the Second Naval Expansion Act, signed by the President in July 1940, which granted $4 billion towards construction for the Navy. In December 1940, a year before the United States declared war, President Roosevelt made it clear that to preserve American independence against the Nazi threat, American production had to mobilize. Rearmament was essential. Providing weapons to the nations fighting against the Nazis would, Roosevelt hoped, enable the U.S. to stay out of the fight. The distribution of the arsenal began with Lend-Lease.
Lend-Lease was put in place because President Roosevelt, and then gradually other members of the administration, the Congress, decided if the United Kingdom, and indeed the Empire, was not supported, it was going to go under. One of the isolation laws had said no one could buy anything unless they bought it with cash and carried it back in their own ships. Well, increasingly, Britain didn't have any cash.
Aware of the need to remain neutral in law, if not in thought, President Roosevelt sought a solution. If Britain could not pay for supplies, the United States would lend them, with payment later in the form of a consideration rather than cash. U.S. Congress passed the Lend-Lease Act in early 1941.
So our country is going to be what our people have proclaimed it must be: the arsenal of democracy.
It would have been very difficult for the United Kingdom, extremely difficult for them to pay for ships, to pay for men, to pay for whatever the accoutrements of war might be. And of course, Russia was in that sense the same. It gave food, it gave munitions, it gave steel, it gave all sorts of things that these countries could not have produced.
Lend-Lease ultimately extended some $50 billion in assistance to as many as 40 nations, including Great Britain, the Soviet Union, China, and British Commonwealth countries. But the policy was not purely altruistic.
The thing is, although Churchill called it the most unthwarted act in history, and in a sense it was, on the other hand, the United States during the war used Lend-Lease to impose a lot of policies on the United Kingdom, for one, that were very hurtful. Lend-Lease, as far as I'm concerned, was also for the United States a weapon, a real weapon, to try to replace the pound with the dollar and to replace Britain as the major financial power in the world with the United States. And of course it worked.
As the arms race developed through the 1930s, the total war to come was, in a sense, already being fought. The outcome of the war was determined as much on the factory floor as on the battlefield. Production was vital to victory. As the major powers prepared for war in Europe, production increased exponentially. Factories went into overdrive. In 1933, for instance, Britain produced 633 aircraft, Germany 368, and France produced none at all. The Soviet Union, in comparison, produced 2,595 aircraft. By the last year of the decade, France produced over 2,000 aircraft. Germany had caught up to the Soviet Union's level of production, with both producing over 10,000 aircraft each. Produced the greatest number that year, with over 15,000 aircraft manufactured. Once the United States entered the war, its factories and factory workers made a significant difference to the Allied war effort. If total war relied on the factory, the American factories were willing and able to deliver victory.
The United States, until after the Second World War, didn't believe in huge standing armies and navies. They could be a threat, and they cost money. So mobilizing both militarily, in terms of the Navy, in terms of industry, and in terms of manpower, really all began once the United States was owned.
Turner! Americans are preparing with all possible speed to take their places on the battlefront. Workers in the mills and the mines are laboring long hours under great pressure. Turn out the weapons, the equipment without which the war cannot be won.
Let's move.
Over the course of the war, American manufacturers shifted their focus to war production.
You got it, sir.
U.S. manufacturers produced in excess of 300,000 aircraft, compared to Germany's 111,000 and Japan's 76,000. American factories produced over 88,000 tanks, contrasted with German output of some 46,000 and Japan's 2,500. The significance of the contribution of United States production to the war effort
looks too run down to provide much defense. Crowd's probably abandoned. Think they'll be back?
Most startling was the number of military trucks which rolled off the United States assembly lines. Some 2.38 million, compared to around 345,000 for Germany and 165,000 for Japan. By 1943, the US was said to be producing a tank every 5 minutes, an aircraft every half hour, and an aircraft carrier every week.
I'm praying our boys found cover from that artillery.
Back them up. Don't you worry.
Mobilized, it drew not only on its own national resources and population, but those of its empire. This belies the common perception that Britain stood alone against the Axis powers in 1940.
Sniper! He's up in that bunker. Flush him out.
After the Second World War, many Britons prided themselves on having mobilized more than any other nation. That's to say, the United Kingdom had a higher proportion of soldiers plus armies workers to total population of any belligerent nation. In fact, that is a very misleading statistic. The reason the United Kingdom was able to mobilize so much was that the British Empire and the United States wanted it so mobilized and supported it with raw materials and with food so that it could do precisely that.
Canadian industry contributed vehicles, weapons, ships and aircraft.
See if we can reach him. I can't move!
6 miles off we come.
Some awards are better than others. We're gonna pull you in. Sit tight. We'll get him.
New customers can get up to £30 in free bets if your first actor loses, plus 100 free spins.
He's not alone.
Over the course of the war, Canadian factories produced more than 800,000 military transport vehicles and 16,000 military aircraft. The extent to which the United Kingdom could wage total war was contingent upon the efforts and commitment of the people of the British Empire.
If one looks at the case of the Soviet Union or indeed Nazi Germany, there we see a much greater commitment to war. But the extent of mobilization in terms of funds in the arms factories is limited by the fact that these countries have to grow their own food. They have to produce their own materials.
Germany also relied on the work of forced laborers to sustain its war effort. The number of slave laborers Germany pressed into service in 5 years was at least equal to the number that crossed the Atlantic during almost 400 years of the slave trade. Food and raw materials were vital to waging total war. For nations which relied on imports for food supply, this would present considerable problems.
Really, the root cause of the war start way back in the 1870s when the European population start to shift away from a grain-based diet towards a meat and milk-based diet. And that means we have to import a lot more fodder to feed the animals to produce the meat and the milk and so on. And for Britain, that's fine, but that was a real problem for Germany.
The raw materials took priority over food supplies.
Goering was quite serious when he said, we've chosen guns over butter, because they didn't want to spend money on importing fodder from Denmark or bacon or milk or whatever to feed the working classes. They want to spend it on iron from Sweden to rearm. That makes them aggressive, that makes them look to the east. That's always the plan, that they will invade Russia and take over Eastern Europe in order to grow food for the German population.
Access to resources was a great strength for the British war effort. It did not have to rely solely on internal resources to prosecute the war. But it also made the nation vulnerable. Imports traveled by sea. The support offered by the US through Lend-Lease would have come to nothing if maritime supply lines were compromised. The German Navy sought to use U-boats to blockade, starve, and ultimately defeat Britain.
That soldier didn't have to die.
The fight to secure the supply lines against German U-boats was known as the Battle of the Atlantic.
It was the vital logistic battle of the war. Whether it failed or succeeded on either side really determined the course of the war, and how well it was going profoundly influenced what each side could be doing in other campaigns.
Gunfire! It must be near our guys.
German U-boat commander Admiral Karl Dönitz fought the Battle of the Atlantic with total war in mind. He also faced competition from other arms of the German military for men and resources. Dönitz saw the Battle of the Atlantic as a tonnage war, a race between the number of ships as submarines or U-boats at sea. Speed at which the Allies could bring new ships and crews into production.
It's usually thought that the main impediment to British imports, submarines, were attacking merchant ships. In fact, really the main impediment was the lack of merchant ships. More and more merchant ships were needed as trade routes become very much longer. And the threat of submarines meant you had to convoy ships together in large numbers, which delayed the movement of the ships. So it's not the submarines themselves that are significant, it's the potential effect of submarines.
The height of the U-boat campaign, the wolf packs stalked Allied convoys and ravaged ships. The Allies lost 575 ships to the U-boats in the last 6 months of 1942. Threat to U-boats pose. The campaign had the potential to starve both war industries and the population. It had the potential to bring the nation to its knees.
You got it, sir.
In 1943, Winston Churchill asserted in the statement to the House of Commons that the U-boat warfare takes the first place in our thoughts.
Damn it!
Stay low! Don't bunch up!
Excellent cover!
Inbound from the east!
Grenade out! Finish up! Gotta clear the area! That's the last of them. Good job, Daniels. Squad, fall in at the bridge. We'll hold the mill as a staging ground. When Pearson gets here, we'll advance to the assembly point. On my way, sir.
Not another.
Fuck! Snipers! Get to cover! Get fire on them!
I need snipers! Get from the door! Reloading!
Reloading! Moving in from the northeast! Pushing in from the northwest! Enemy infantry! Enemy's moving! Contact! 10 o'clock!
There's more coming!
Grab what you can and hold this position! Reloading!
I got it! They're making a break! Now! Get out of the road!
Fritz is on the move! Get in!
Fuck!
Snipers! Get to cover! Get fire on them!
In May, Germany made extreme exertions to meet the British, American, and Canadian forces of the sea and hurl their strength upon the U-boat.
Daniels, we got ammo!
Hard 40 boats with its relation radar. It resolves confidence in pilot.
The turn of the tide was the result of a whole combination
I
of
need more ammo,
things.
sir!
It was the result of the continuing evolution of the intelligence system. It was the result of the increase in strength of the escort forces. The result of technological developments.
Existence of our multi-defense from the air, dropping depth charges if and when they encounter the enemy. Searching miles in isolation for a shadow beneath the waves. It's an enormous task which required significant physical and mental endurance with a footage learned from past time. The chief of the boat captain ultimately found
Lobbing a grenade! Enemy's moving! Fritz is on the move! He's leaving cover! Open fire!
considerable losses.
I need ammo,
The
sir!
line was never completely
Here you
cut.
go, Private! We'll hold them off!
Allies
Stay
took
alert!
out for the campaign.
We're gonna wait for
There will be no
Pearson.
winning strategy.
Ready! Daniels, on me. We hold this position until Pearson gets here, then we take the hill together.
Constant battle of offense versus defense, and developing technology on both sides. Fundamentally, all these things, together with perhaps the most important, was the provision of long-range aircraft and air support to the convoys, which created a system which was able to reduce the U-boat threat.
Decisions based on your gut private. We'd still be on the boat normally.
Exactly. You heard how Pearson's platoon got wiped out at Kasserine? Looks like history's repeating itself.
It better not. I want to know what really happened there.
Yeah. Well, I don't have the guts to ask Turner. But I know someone who does.
Our mission is to knock out the German artillery together. But if Pearson sees an opening, he'll take it. Squad be damned. There's a storm brewing between Turner and Pearson, and it's only going to get worse.
Labour was vital to the successful execution of Turkey. But the extent to which it was used in different nations at different times of the war varied considerably. Women increasingly filled the gaps in the fields and on the factory floor left by men on active service. Sometimes women took these roles by choice. Sometimes they were compelled to do so.
You've got this massive involvement of the civilian population in a way that has never happened before. Being a citizen was no longer about just doing your own thing and voting every 5 years or something. It was about, what are you doing to help the war effort?
The number of women in the workforce rose from 6,250,000 in 1939 to 7,750,000 at the peak of mobilization in 1943. Expansion was not only in numbers, but in the variety of wars undertaken. In the interwar years, women's work had been regarded as unskilled labour. And they were discouraged from entering the workforce. But now the nation
Still waiting on Pearson. There's no telling what he'll do, but his record ain't exactly stellar. If you were here, Paul, I know you'd set him straight.
to leave home to work. They were drawn into manufacturing and agriculture and worked in factories and shipyards across the country. Mining was one of the few fields that remained a male domain. Initially, the British government opened a network of volunteers, setting up more wood exhibitions around the country.
Sir.
Recruitment fell far short of the target set.
About Pearson getting those men killed at Kasserine Pass.
Secured 100 volunteer
One day,
workers. It had aimed for
when you lead your own
2,000.
platoon, you find out there's usually two options.
Balancing work
Bad
and family
and
was the
worse.
sticking point. The job
Focus on your men,
really catered for part-time hours.
because that's what'll get you through.
Nonetheless,
Tell
to
that to
sustain
Pearson.
the war effort, the
Sergeant
nation
Pearson.
needed workers and volunteers from all quarters of society.
Just pray you're never in that
If you
position.
think about the war effort, you know, the absolutely massive amount of
Got a transmission from Baker. They're going to assault Hill 493.
weapons.
Pearson's with them.
It's just not enough people going
Our
into
guys
the
and
street.
second platoon.
As the war progressed, various pieces of legislation mandated the National Service Number 2 Act was implemented. Single women between 20 and 21.
Keep up! Let's go! Let's go! Maybe Pearson's still at the base of the hill.
I'm guessing we're way past that.
Keep moving, goddammit!
Sounds like our guys!
Daniels!
You alright?
Yeah, I'm alright. Where's the rest? Pearson took him to attack the guns. We begged for reinforcements.
Stubborn son of a bitch. We'll come back for you.
Hurry! They need us!
So they directed you, you had to go, and I think people don't appreciate that actually neat. If you were placed in a factory, you have no power to leave because you're committing an offence for leaving. And of course, that's why some people took time anyway.
Get down! Artillery run! move up this hill. Stay low and advance.
As you see, the agencies called separation allowance. So if we get 30 shillings a week, and that was not enough to pay rent and pay the children. So most of me had to look at like factory canteens, intake meals for almost nothing. And there were nurseries.
Daniel, take them out one at a time!
Each one as well. We were much more differential situations.
Daniel, come on!
Keep pushing! Thank God, they're pinning our boys! Could use some ammo, sir! Get down!
She's going out and enjoying herself.
MG down! 2 gunners left!
Those MGs are ripping us apart!
One more MG! Take him out!
Gotta keep moving!
Hit those MGs!
It's very common, in fact, for women to be encouraged to acquire physical skills and motor skills, including nourishment, skiing, shooting skills, and so forth, so that in any forthcoming war they can participate equally in the army.
Take out those gunners!
They found they would encounter, say, male training officers who just so social reality versus the imagery of what women could really achieve in the Soviet Union at that time was
Lob a grenade!
They were at the time, and probably still are, in respects to make unique in the annals of the war. After that came the best known of those regiments, the Night Witches Air Bomber Regiment. Nighttime airplanes that was size-based.
Daniel, you made it! Good to see you, buddy! Grenade out!
They won
Lob it a grenade!
more heroes in the Soviet Union, more pinnacle of wars than just about any other unit of the Red Army.
Pearson! What the hell are you thinking?
I'm staying on mission! We need to get our engineer to clear that pillbox!
This isn't over!
Daniels, escort Parker so he can plant a charge on that bunker!
Yes, Sergeant!
Go through
Daniels, let me know when you're ready!
deployed.
Keep your head down and go! Daniels,
As a group,
hit that MG pillbox! Move up! Go, go, go! Covering fire!
Their task force to kill like many of these.
Cover Parker so we can advance!
There's a most famous dramatic figure again comes out of this. Other than one to check.
Parker, move up! Going!
Enemy soldiers. She was a crack shot.
Move now!
Parker's down! Daniels, get the charge and finish the job!
All right, cover me! Going for the charge! I got it! Daniel, secure that pole car! I'm going for it! I need cover and fire! We'll cover you, Daniels! Hit that pillbox!
We're talking about circumstances where food was in desperately short supply, where...
Keep your head down and go! Lay down fire on that MG! Move up! Go, go, go! Cover and fire!
Reduce initial.
Come on! Now's your chance!
Machine gun!
But buying factories. This
Move now!
10 dimensional. 10 deal.
Fire on the MG!
So on their shoulder,
Covering fire!
certainly dependent in the most arduous circumstances.
Tossing a smoke grenade! Throwing a smoke! Covering fire! Smoke fire suppressed! Is it safe to move? Go, go, go! Moving now! MG suppressed! Ready for your signal! Now, Parker! Going! Lay down fire on that MG! Charge is planted! Keep your head down and go! Keep pressure on that MG! Move up! Go, go, go! Covering fire! Now, Parker! Going in! MG down for now! Ready for your signal! You're clear! Moving now! Suppress that MG! Ground infantry on the left! Toss it a smoke! MG's quiet! Should I go? Go! Moving now! Grenade in front! Target! Troops! MG's fire now! Ready for your signal! Go! I'm moving up! Smoke grenade!
Also drove trains, buses, and the postal service.
Keep your head down and go! Daniels, hit that MG pillbox! Move up! Go, go, go! Cover and fire! MG down for now! Parker, move up! Move up, cover me! Keep pressure on that MG! Parker, move up!
Parker's down! Daniels, get the charge and finish the job!
All right, cover me! Going for the charge! I got it! We'll suppress the bumper! Daniels, secure that pole charge! I'm going for it! I need cover and fire!
This will allow us to fully mobilize the also reflect the elements of see which will race to.
Hurry and grab that car! Sergeant Flynn, get back!
Almost pressing touched the turkey. Success. The hidden camera.
Move it!
It's much to close the theaters and horse racing and so on. So we must
Could use some more.
entertain the so Hitler was not a radical in the Turkey War. He went along with it in the sense that he realized that more people had to be mobilized.
In the bunker! Now!
Mobilizing for Turkey until July 1944. It was arguably too late. As was the case.
How many casualties?
Japan struggled.
We executed the mission.
How many?
Our instructions were to take this hill.
You should have waited for
There
us.
wasn't time.
What about our...
We had orders!
The hell with our goddamn orders!
Encouraged to support the war effort through traditional supportive roles.
You think I want any of this?
Groups, and were not mobilized until
We are cogs in the machine, Joseph. We start going our own way, the whole thing breaks down. When did you forget that?
These are men!
As
Our
soldiers,
men!
they are mobilized
What did
as
you forget?
supporters of the Imperial Project. And therefore,
Those
unless they're
150s are
living
still
outside
firing in our
Japan
position.
or near the front, they will see what's happening. The news
Keep
is
moving.
slowly renewed.
We're taking them out!
So carefully constructed within Japan that
Daniels,
that sort
artillery's
of
ahead.
history
Get that door
never
open.
found its way in.
Eventually, the demands of Turkey war and mounting losses meant the nation was forced to draw women into the labor market.
We do see mobilization of young women who will ultimately, by 1943 and 44, because of labor shortage, be moved into so
Take some ammo, Daniels! I need more ammo, sir! Heads up, Daniels!
It's time for push-up. As the raids of Japan became common,
Enemies down! Daniels, get a thermite on that gun!
Female side of the Japanese population until late 1944, 1945, where almost a kind of last-ditch effort will take place in these front of magazine covers with women.
Fire the hole!
Gardening tool almost for being trained, but
Hunters, get ahead! There's more guns up ahead! Keep moving!
to defend actually happened.
they were mobilized by should or contributed to the war effort voluntarily. Fuel and flak stretched across the world. Was more effective on the total defense from 65% in 1934 to 85% in 1944. The extent to which nations mobilized for and fought on total warfare.
This is it! Last 150! Crowds are everywhere!
Materials, nations became field total. Change the lives of people. In comparison to those who lived
Take some ammo, Daniels!
those who experienced it.
We need to sweep this area before hitting the 150.
I need more ammo, Lieutenant! Here, Daniels! Don't let out!
Together, this is the review.
Take him down! Clear the area!
Industry and workforce. Area 1 campaigns which is seized. Procedures to nations to starvation. Nation policies in response to campaigns of genocide.
Enemies around the gun!
This conflict will ordinary people. Reveal both the best and the most elegant. People whose lives were lost or ravaged with the development.
Fire them up! First aid kit ready when you are! Enemies guarding the 150! Enemies down! Hit the last guns!
Could use some help!
Hit!
Time to mop up! Kill those guns!
Lose the lives of those hostages.
Charges planted! Tiger! Take it out! With what? We still got some thermite! It ain't enough! It has to be! Pearson and I will draw its fire! Daniel, you plant a thermite on the back! Now move!
That nations drew upon the labor, food, and raw materials of the lands they occupied.
You have to take it out! With what? We still got some thermite! It ain't enough! It has to be! Pearson and I will draw its fire! Daniel, you plant a thermite on the back! Now move! Sir, ready for ammo! Let me know the position!
It's too late.
Any attack and any assault to sovereignty. At the Chamber of Deputies in Paris, scene darkness, gendarmes on guard. A sense of fateful decision among the people as France declares war on Germany. Of them captured when the city fell. Elsewhere in Poland, the Germans took millions of prisoners, and the interminable line of 20 symbolized the swift destruction of a nation.
That followed profoundly affected the fabric of Polish society.
You have to take it out! With what? We still got some thermite! It ain't enough! It has to be! Pearson and I will draw its fire! Daniel, you plant a thermite on the back! Now move!
The nations in Germany's path were safe.
You have to take it out! With what? We still got some thermite! It ain't enough! It has to be! Pearson and I will draw its fire! Daniel, you plant a thermite on the back! Now move!
certainly in the speed at which you for instance, the locals, their armies, Holland, Belgium, that's the ships and ships. What do you mean to this moment?
Anticipating
We have to take it out! With what? We still got the thermite! It ain't enough! It has to be! Pearson and I will draw its fire! Daniels, you plant a thermite on the back! Now move!
Sense of humiliation and shock. France, which had emerged victorious from the war.
We have to take it out! With what? We still got the thermite! It ain't enough! It has to be! Pearson and I will draw its fire! Daniels, you plant a thermite on the back! Now move!
Second Army is going to be in a 4-year trench war. Attempt to return to
Sir, ready for ammo! Here you go, brother!
cafes and bars and shops. There was a notion that you had engaged, and yet people had to get on with the system.
Ready! There's no way around! Focus on the tiger!
armistice in September 1943. But the withdrawal did not bring peace. The occupation created political division. In 1946, Greece fell into a savage civil war.